An interesting new avenue you've chosen to take here, Brock. Trying to prove, well, the existence of the soul through the experiences of those who are truly at the worst time in their lives to make any kind of coherent and rational judgment of what they experience. Speaking of near-death experiences. Now, you've said a few things that are just not correct, Brock. You've claimed that all near-death experiences are the same. Well, it didn't take me very long to find a article on SpringerLink of a survey done in Germany by, I'm not going to try to pronounce these guys' names. I would ruin it. But the first names are easy. Herbert and Ina. And Burnt. I can pronounce those. I'll put the link in the side. Now, they actually tested the claim that you made, that all near-death experiences are the same, and they found that no, they're not. They vary from person to person, and they vary culturally. And that's a very important aspect there, that depending on your culture, depending on the set of beliefs that you're surrounded by, you experience a different type of near-death experience than other people of different cultures would. So, how is it that your culture is impacting what you experience here, Brock? How is it what you believe, what you've been taught to believe, impacts your experience here, Brock? If they are what you claim they are, some example of a soul living on after the brain has ceased. Well, if your example is valid, then you're right. They should be the same. If the materialistic view, the one that you don't want spoken of because it's simply, not because it's a bad view or wrong, or you just don't want it spoken about, you don't want it brought up because it undermines your argument. Of course you don't want the opposition to show that you're wrong, because then where do you go? I don't know. So, no, near-death experiences are not nearly as similar as you expect, but they are similar. It's just like if you took 1,000 people and you fed them, say, several ounces of scotch, they're all going to be drunk. You're going to have 1,000 drunk people. If you had 1,000 people and you gave them 3 or 4, 5 joints, you're going to have 1,000 stoned people. You give 1,000 people LSD and you're going to have 1,000 tripping people. They're all going to experience the same experience. They're going to experience what happens when drugs change how the brain functions. Indeed, Brock, I just did a cursory look at near-death experiences this morning because, I don't really study them. I don't look into them because they're hooey. If you're a neurologist, they might be interesting. But for a biologist, for an evolutionary biologist such as myself, or the route I'm going, they're not really that interesting. So I don't study them. But just a cursory view, something that obviously you didn't do, shows many ways of actually producing near-death experiences, either using G-forces in a centrifuge, or using drugs, or even using ways of tricking the mind, visual stimuli. They all produce near-death experiences, Brock. So again, we can simulate near-death experiences. How does that, then where does your claim come in? So we've shown that, and I'll link the Springer article on the side, that no, they're not all the same. They do vary. Just like drug trips vary. Just like alcoholic experiences vary. We can simulate them. We can artificially induce them. So, where does that leave you? It leaves your argument flat on the ground, like a fish out of water, gasping for air. It's had the life stripped from it. But let's talk about the neurology. This I know a little bit more about. Not much. But I do know when a person dies, it's not just death chemicals released in the brain, which there are, though. There are the same chemicals released in the brain as released into the brain of people who are undergoing major stress. You have things from your adrenal glands being pumped in, adrenaline. You have endorphins released in copious quantities, similar to the endorphins released by pregnant women when they're giving birth, which actually reduces their pain load by, I think it was 60 to 80%. Imagine birth without those chemicals. And many of these chemicals are chemically very similar to the chemicals you find in things like LSD. They do induce hallucinatory effects in the brain. The sense of euphoria, things like that, are caused by these neurotransmitters that are released in copious amounts when someone is under extraordinary stress, like, say, dying. Now, the other thing you claim is that no brain activity is found. Well, you have to think, how do they test for the brain activity? Many, especially in the past, many ways of testing for brain activity was to apply electrodes to the brain. And honestly, those electrodes have a certain sensitivity, and they cannot register the most minute amount of brain activity. So you couldn't technically say that a person was truly brain dead, only brain dead to the point of our technology. Today we have other ways of testing. We can test, for instance, blood flow in the brain. If the brain tissue has died, it's pretty much starting to turn into mush, blood flow to that part of the brain ceases. And that's actually a far better test of how functional or damaged the brain is after death than, say, trying to use a electroencephalogram. We can also use MRIs. We can use CAT scans, etc. Now, here's something interesting, Brock. When anyone's had any true physical damage to certain areas of the brain, many of them on the left hemisphere, there has been no recovery. Never. Because left hemisphere is a very important part on how the brain functions. It's a very important part on about when in regards to our consciousness. So, with that, if we see major damage by, say, following blood flow versus just looking for electrical activity, we can say that a person is we can say pretty certainly whether a person is dead or not. And those people that they pretty much determine as dead, with a few minor exceptions, never recover. They remain dead. Occasionally, you get one or two exceptions to the rule, but medical science isn't 100%, and it might be a long while before it is. But when in regards to measuring electrical function in the brain, it's very difficult, number one. Number two, they don't do it to people that they're working on in the ICU that have just had a coronary event. So of course they don't know if the brain functions there or not. They don't have time to. And most people who have suffered near-death experiences are usually suffer them under the distress of doctors trying to resuscitate them. Usually if you're having a near-death experience and there's no one around, you're probably not going to be around later to explain it, simply because there's no one there to bring you back. So no, Brock, your argument fails. The attempt to say that near-death experiences are all the same, well, it can be shown otherwise. The attempt to claim that, why would, it's somehow against the rules for us people who believe in the physical universe and physical causes for things to use those causes to explain away your mythology. Well, it's not. It's totally legitimate. So we remove from you another gap for you to shove your God into. Sorry. So I'm going to get this up. I kind of rambled a bit this morning. Yeah, Brock lives on the opposite coast from me, so there's like 3 hours difference. By the time I wake up, he's already had half a day. Well, a quarter of a day ahead of me. So, might have rambled a little, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And Brock, let's see another one, because your arguments are great. They're fun. They're not very well put together or intelligent, but they are fun. Okay.